The UK can destroy Russia in just 55 minutes, and Putin knows it. That's why he's desperate to make Britain flinch. After UK-supplied Storm Shadow missiles struck deep inside Russian territory, Putin fired off his usual threats, even hinting at targeting the UK with Russia's newest ballistic missile. But here's the thing Putin doesn't seem to get. The UK isn't scared. While Russia talks a big game, the UK has the power to back up its words, and it's ready to remind the Kremlin of the consequences if they cross the line. With nuclear submarines that can strike Moscow before anyone has time to react, the UK isn't just a target, it's a nightmare for Russia. In this video, we're breaking down why Putin's threats are all bark, why the UK remains unshaken, and how Britain's submarines could change the game in just 55 minutes. The story begins with President Joe Biden finally lifting the restriction on US-supplied long-range weapons to strike deep into Russian territory. As soon as Biden gave this much-awaited green light, the US and France followed suit, permitting the use of their Storm Shadow and Scalp cruise missiles, which are practically the same weapon. And Ukraine wasted no time. The permission officially came on November 17, 2024. On November 20th, Ukraine fired the US-supplied ATACMS and the UK-supplied Storm Shadows on a fortified command post in the Kursk region. The attack reportedly killed Russian Lieutenant General Valery Solodchuk, injured a North Korean general, and killed hundreds of soldiers. Though Putin denied any deaths among the high-ranking officers, it's obvious that the November 20th attack severely rattled Putin. So he started firing off threats like warning shots. In a televised address, reserved for moments Putin deems critical, he issued a stern warning to the US and UK, accusing them of escalating the war in Ukraine. The message was simple: supply weapons used against Russia, and Russia will retaliate resolutely in a mirror way. He even floated the idea of targeting military facilities in these countries, a dangerous escalation designed to rattle Western resolve. During the same address, Putin boasted about testing a new missile, the Oreshnik, claiming that it's fast enough to evade any air defenses. Reportedly traveling at 10 times the speed of sound, the missile instantly became yet another tool in his arsenal of intimidation. Though the Oreshnik wasn't equipped with nuclear warheads when fired, Putin said that this weapon was comparable in strength to a nuclear strike, provided enough missiles were aimed at a target. But wait a second, Putin said that Russia would respond in a mirror way from now on. And as things stand, the UK wouldn't ever fire a nuclear weapon first. After all, the UK has historically showcased a commitment to a philosophy of deterrence, not aggression. So why are we even talking about a nuclear response from the UK? The answer lies in Russia's updated nuclear doctrine, which was unveiled only a day after the green light on long-range missile strikes into Russia. And as you'll soon see, the timing is no accident. With the new update, Russia has redefined sovereignty to mean much more than state survival. The term now includes regime stability, freedom from external influence, and even control of its information space. Any attack threatening these could now justify nuclear retaliation. And there it is, even a perceived external influence could now trigger a nuclear attack. The broad interpretation of this term blurs the line between existential threats and smaller-scale conflicts, creating a rather dangerous uncertainty. However, the doctrine does get rather explicit in specific parts, none of which inspire comfort. Russia's nuclear doctrine now explicitly states that if non-nuclear states like Ukraine act with the support of nuclear-armed allies like the UK, it could be seen as a joint attack, justifying a nuclear response. This language is a clear attempt to deter Western nations from arming Ukraine or escalating their military support. And that's not even the only potential trigger for a nuclear attack. The expanded list of triggers now includes military coalitions expanding near Russia's borders, large-scale exercises in proximity, threats to critical transport routes, and anti-satellite warfare. With this new list of triggers, Moscow ties even conventional acts to potential nuclear retaliation, injecting risk into every single confrontation. Ambiguity is Russia's weapon here. The doctrine doesn't spell out clear red lines, thus ensuring potential adversaries fear any miscalculation. It's about sowing division in NATO and keeping the West hesitant while shielding Putin's regime from external and internal threats. But do you know what else is rather ambiguous? The UK's nuclear deterrence strategy. While Russia wields uncertainty as a tool for destabilization, the UK embraces it to maintain peace and deter aggression. The UK's approach to deterrence deliberately leaves the when, how, and on what scale of its nuclear response undefined. This calculated vagueness is designed to keep adversaries guessing and complicate their decision-making. It's a subtle but effective way of ensuring the deterrent remains credible without being overly provocative. However, Professor Michael Clarke of the King's College London, the former Director General of the Royal United Services Institute, decided to break the UK's usual silence. In a YouTube interview, Clarke laid it all out, boldly, plainly, and a tad ominously. According to Clark, if the order was given, a British nuclear submarine could obliterate Moscow in exactly 55 minutes. Yes, you heard that right, 55 minutes. And destroying Moscow means destroying Russia because, let's face it, the Kremlin isn't just the symbolic heart of the nation, it's its command center. Clark then explained how this sheer scale of destruction was even possible. In their plan, around 40 warheads would immediately head towards Russia, each 6 times more powerful than the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Clark doesn't mince words. No matter how many warheads Russia's air defenses managed to intercept, enough would reach Moscow to leave it utterly devastated. It's just a straight-up technological fact, he claimed. Clark's point wasn't to escalate tensions, far from it. It was just to remind everyone that nuclear deterrence is mutual. He made it clear that while Russian figures like Sergei Karaganov talk cavalierly about using nukes against Europe, they conveniently forget that such aggression would invite catastrophic retaliation. The UK might not have thousands of nuclear warheads like Russia or even the US, but its independent nuclear deterrent is just as dangerous in its own right. With this in mind, let's break down the UK's nuclear arsenal and explain how it's capable of such destruction. As of 2024, the UK maintains a stockpile of approximately 225 nuclear warheads, with up to 120 of them considered operationally available for deployment. However, only about 40 warheads are deployed at any given time, distributed across 4 submarines. Though the UK's stockpile is relatively small in comparison to the 2 leading nuclear powers, the US with 5,748 and Russia with 5,580, the strategic value of its sea-based deterrent is immense. Plus, not everything is in numbers, as a huge chunk of the Russian arsenal is virtually useless, either outdated or poorly maintained. The UK's policy is built on the principle of maintaining a minimal credible deterrent, which focuses on ensuring the country's security without engaging in excessive nuclear proliferation. Despite this, the UK's arsenal has been growing in recent years. The 2021 Integrated Review, a comprehensive assessment of the UK's national security, raised the cap on the total number of nuclear warheads the UK can own to 260. This marked the first increase in the country's nuclear arsenal since the Cold War. The timing of this change was no coincidence. The change was introduced right around the time Russia increased its aggressive posture. This wasn't the first time a change in the UK's nuclear doctrine was tied to Russia. During the Cold War, the UK developed an independent targeting doctrine, which was based on the Moscow criterion. This means that the UK's nuclear forces were intended to be capable of targeting the Russian capital, Moscow, along with other major cities, to ensure any nuclear conflict would have catastrophic consequences for the aggressor. Though the specifics of the UK's current targeting policies aren't fully disclosed, it's widely believed that the Moscow criterion still forms the core of its nuclear strategy. And one thing's for sure, you shouldn't mess with a country that has tailored its nuclear strategy specifically to ensure your capital is on the line. Suddenly, the 55-minute window is starting to make a lot of sense, isn't it? But the UK isn't only laser-focused when it comes to the potential target of its nuclear arsenal. It also relies on a single delivery system. This is an unorthodox approach in the nuclear world, where nuclear triads are typically the norm. The biggest players in the nuclear space rely on a combination of land-based missiles, strategic bombers, and submarine-launched ballistic missiles to ensure survivability in the event of a first strike. The UK, however, places all its nuclear eggs in one basket: the Vanguard-class nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines, or SSBNs for short. The Vanguard-class submarines comprise 4 vessels: 1. the HMS Vanguard, the lead boat; 2. HMS Victorious; 3. HMS Vengeance; and 4. HMS Vigilant. These 4 vessels are among the largest and most powerful in the Royal Navy's fleet, with a submerged displacement of 17,500 tons. This impressive displacement makes them twice the size of their predecessors, the Resolution-class submarines. Each Vanguard-class SSBN is approximately 490 feet in length, which allows for the accommodation of up to 16 Trident II D5 missiles. These missiles, the backbone of the nuclear deterrent, are capable of reaching targets up to 4,600 miles away, providing the UK with a truly global reach. For context, all 4 submarines are based at the HM Naval Base Clyde, which is some 25 miles west of Glasgow, Scotland, and some 2,300 miles from Moscow. With this distance and the stealth of these submarines, they can practically sneak up on Moscow without anyone noticing. Pair the stealth with remarkable endurance, and you've got a never-ending threat to Russia. You see, the Vanguard-class SSBNs are powered by pressurized water reactors, which allow them to circumnavigate the globe without refueling. They have the ability to remain submerged for months on end, with their only limitation being the amount of food and provisions aboard. Their propulsion system gives them a maximum submerged speed of 25 knots, allowing them to evade detection and maintain an element of surprise. But the real speed comes when the Vanguard-class submarines launch their payload. The Trident II D5 missile, which measures an impressive 44 feet in length and weighs around 130,000 pounds, can travel at a blistering speed of over 20,000 feet per second after just 2 minutes of the third stage motor setting in. That's more than 20 times the speed of sound, enough to turn any enemy target into a distant memory before they've even had a chance to react. The power of the Trident missiles is simply unmatched, allowing them to deliver warheads with devastating accuracy. Additionally, each submarine is equipped with advanced surveillance systems, including optronic masts and a combination of search and attack periscopes. This allows them to monitor and assess their environment without exposing themselves to detection. And let us tell you, these submarines are always watching. The core concept of the UK's nuclear strategy is the so-called Continuous At-Sea Deterrence, or CAS-D for short. This policy has been in place since 1969, and it ensures that at least one Vanguard-class SSBN is always on patrol. The same submarine will also carry a full load, up to 16 Trident missiles, ensuring it's ready to strike and strike hard at any time. This relentless patrol guarantees that there is never a moment when the UK's deterrent is vulnerable. But why is this deterrent exclusively sea-based? Well, this has been a strategic decision as much as a technological one. You see, Russia's military buildup, particularly in the nuclear domain, has been a focal point of concern for NATO countries, including the UK. Russia's ongoing modernization of its nuclear forces, combined with aggressive rhetoric and military posturing, particularly in the context of the Ukraine conflict, has reignited fears of nuclear escalation. But if Moscow were to strike, it would strike land-based capacities. The ability of the Vanguard-class submarines to remain hidden and undetectable ensures that even in the worst-case scenario, the UK will retain the capacity to retaliate decisively against any Russian threat. In other words, sea-based deterrence is designed to ensure that the UK maintains a credible and effective response to Russian aggression under any circumstances. In response to nuclear advancements, the UK has committed to modernizing its own arsenal, including upgrades to the Trident II D5 missiles and warheads. The UK's warheads are closely tied to US technology and infrastructure. However, the UK has always maintained that it retains full sovereignty over its nuclear forces, with the final say in their use remaining firmly in British hands. However, this doesn't mean that the UK would act alone in the case of a nuclear escalation. While the UK retains the ultimate authority over its weapons, British nuclear targets are coordinated with NATO's broader nuclear strategy, as part of the American Single Integrated Operation Plan, or SEOP. This means that in a general conflict, the UK's nuclear arsenal will be deployed in line with NATO's needs and objectives, which could extend beyond targeting Russia alone. Yet, should Russia decide to launch a nuclear attack against Britain, the response would be unequivocal. All of the UK's nuclear deterrent would be aimed squarely at Moscow. In other words, the UK wouldn't hesitate to deliver its weapons directly to the heart of Russia's capital, making Moscow not just a target, but the target. At the end of the day, it seems the UK is quite prepared to take on Russia. That's probably why the country remains largely unshaken by Putin's frequent nuclear threats. In the UK, these threats hold little weight in terms of influencing policy or public opinion. The UK, along with Scandinavian and Baltic states, sees Russia's nuclear saber-rattling as more of a tactical effort by the Kremlin to instill fear and influence the decision of Western politicians rather than a serious threat. Essentially, the consistent, reckless nature of Putin's nuclear rhetoric has lost its impact in the UK, where the resolve to maintain a strong nuclear deterrent remains unwavering. The only thing that could potentially threaten this deterrent is the fact that each vessel in the Vanguard fleet has surpassed its originally planned service life of 37 years or more, and it's starting to show. All Vanguard-class submarines are increasingly displaying signs of wear. Maintenance problems like the recent incident where a faulty depth gauge nearly caused an accident highlight the difficulties the UK faces in maintaining these aging vessels. Lengthy patrols and extended maintenance periods, such as the nearly 4-year delay for the HMS Vanguard's deep maintenance, further strain the fleet's operational capacity. That's why the UK is already planning for the next generation of SSBNs, the Dreadnought-class. These new submarines, slated to enter service in the early 2030s, will carry the UK's nuclear deterrent well into the 2060s. With a new pressurized water reactor designed by Rolls-Royce, the Dreadnought-class submarines will be more powerful, efficient, and capable than their predecessors, ensuring that the UK remains at the cutting edge of nuclear deterrence technology. Despite a reduced missile capacity, each Dreadnought-class submarine will only carry 12 Trident II D5 missiles compared to the 16 on the Vanguard-class. These new submarines will offer a more modern, efficient, and reliable platform, incorporating the latest technological advancements such as the quad-pack missile compartments. These compartments were jointly developed with the US Navy, and they will also be present in the Columbia-class SSBNs, designed to replace the Ohio-class in the US. However, the transition to the Dreadnought-class comes with its own set of challenges. The biggest is that these submarines aren't expected to enter service until the 2030s. If there are any delays, the Vanguard submarines may have to serve well beyond their anticipated lifespans. This could present challenges in terms of readiness and maintenance, and put added added pressure on the UK to sustain its nuclear deterrent capabilities in a time of escalating tensions with Russia. As Russia continues to modernize and expand its nuclear forces, the need for a reliable and ready deterrent remains as critical as ever. So the UK must balance the continued operation of its aging Vanguard-class submarines with the timely deployment of the Dreadnought-class, ensuring that it can maintain its strategic edge in an increasingly unpredictable world. As Putin slowly runs out of options, he might try something drastic, like a nuclear test or even hitting British military assets. And while that's certainly worrying, don't expect the UK to flinch. Remember, the UK has faced down Russian provocations before. In 2006 and 2018, when Russian agents tried to poison British citizens, the UK didn't hesitate to take action. It expelled dozens of Russian diplomats, shut down Russian organizations, and ramped up security. The message was clear: if you mess with us, there will be consequences. This means that even if Putin decides to attack British military installations, the UK won't sit idly by. It will treat this attack like the crime it is. Russia might think it can get away with something like this, but Britain has a track record of tracking down perpetrators, and the Kremlin won't be able to hide behind their cyber attacks or sabotage for long. As for any larger provocations or attacks, the British SSBNs are always ready, lurking beneath the waves, ready to deliver a decisive response. And deliver it in under an hour. But what do you think? Will we get to see the British SSBNs in action, or will diplomacy keep us from the brink? And what happens if Russia decides to test those red lines? Will the West finally take the leap and escalate first? Or will they continue to tiptoe around the edge? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Now go and check out why the UK has no choice but to go to war with Russia, or click this other video instead.